back to American involvement in Pakistani affairs, what methods of subversion does the U.S. government normally use in countries like Pakistan to keep a handle on the situation and keep them going in the direction that they want?
Usually they just try to buy off the elites. Why do they support Musharraf? No. Why do they support Zia-ul-Haq? Why do they support ISI, as long as they're doing what the U.S. wanted? You buy off the powerful sectors, and as long as the government more or less follows the policies you want, that suffices. If the government follows different policies, you try to foment an opposition. That's a lot of what USAID does around the world. In countries that do not conform to U.S. interests, USAID is consistently involved in subversive activities, supporting opposition groups, opposition organizations, business groups, and so on. And it does undermine democracy. That's its goal. That happens in take right here in the, it's so common I could almost put a pin in a map and give examples. But take, say, right now in Venezuela. There was a military coup in Venezuela in 2002, which overthrew the government, eliminated the Supreme Court, the Parliament, and so on. The U.S. openly and strongly supported it. All right, it was reversed in a few days. There was a popular uprising. Well, what did the U.S. turn to then? Government was restored. Immediately, the U.S. what are called democracy promotion efforts began to fund the opposition, to foment discord and dissension, maybe terror, we can't be sure. We don't really know in detail because they won't tell us what they're doing. They won't. It's impossible to find out how the money is being spent, but it's definitely being spent to try to undermine the government. Now, would the United States allow that? I mean, suppose that Iran tried to fund groups in the United States that were trying to overthrow the government. Would we let that happen?
Of course not.
No country would let that happen. But in the West, the imperial mentality is so deeply embedded that it's taken for granted that we have a right to do that. In fact, it's not even discussed.
Pakistan is often referred to in the Western media as a client state since its inception, and many of our viewers not familiar with the terminology, but some are. What in your mind is a client state?
It's a state that relies on a powerful outside state for its sustenance and support and is supposed to follow orders.
Okay. It didn't sound bad, the first part. It's supposed to.
Well, I think it does sound bad. Okay. You shouldn't rely on some outside force for your to determine the nature of your society. I mean, for example, to rely on U.S. support, was it $18 billion military aid? That's not wise. That's not where Pakistan's problems lie. Not in building up a bigger military and intelligence system, and certainly not in pursuing Zia's programs of radical Islamization of the educational system. It's hardly in Pakistan's interest, but it was in the U.S. interest, so yes, as a client state, it followed it.
Is Pakistan, in your mind, a failed state?
That's a very strange notion. I mean, if you really look at the definition, in fact, I wrote a book about it called...
Of course. I was alluding to that.
Well, what I was pointing out is that if you take a definition of failed state, you could say the United States is a failed state. I mean, one of the properties of a failed state is that its leadership either doesn't want to or is incapable of protecting the population. Yes, that's very true of the United States. It's consistently followed policies which endanger the population in the interest of extending the power of elite sectors within. I already gave some examples.
So if America is a failed state...
Well, I wouldn't say that. I'd say the concept is useless. Okay. Because there are elements of what's called a failed state all over the place. We use the term in the imperial West, we use the term for states that we don't like. They're failed states. The ones that Saudi Arabia is not called a failed state. Is it democratic?
Not at all.
Okay. Are women properly treated? No. But it's not a failed state because it's a client state. It does pretty much what we want.
Yeah, President Obama, when he spoke in Cairo, he was talking to who? I wasn't quite sure. He was talking about embracing democratic and American values, but he was in Cairo.
And he was asked about that. And did you read what he said?
No, I did not. Please share.
Well, he was asked by some journalists, what are you going to say about Egypt? I mean, Egypt's a brutal dictatorship.
Yes.
He said, well, I don't like to call people names. And I think they're playing a constructive role.
Do you think...
I mean, what does that tell you about his concern for democracy or for Egyptians in prison and so on?
Do you think that mercenary companies or these, private contractors like Blackwater operate in Pakistan? I mean, the Pakistani media is abuzz with all kinds of stories about Marines moving to Islamabad. They're building this huge embassy there where no Pakistani contractors can get in to help with the work or anything. So what do you think? Is that possible or likely?
Well, it's Obama's policy. Bush began the program of mega embassies.
Right.
They built one in Iraq. It's called an embassy. It's actually a city. There's a closed city inside Baghdad, completely closed, which is called an embassy. Obama wants to expand it. Its current funding is $1.5 billion a year, the same as the alleged aid to Pakistan.
Right.
That's to build the mega embassy, but Obama's expanding it. Next year it's going to be $1.8 billion, and they project it'll go up the following year. Now Obama is deciding to build a similar mega embassy in Islamabad, another one in Kabul, also huge consulates around the country. All of that signals an intention to stay there and run the region. You don't build installations like that if you're going to go home. So yes, these are ways to make sure we run this region. It's like military bases.
Some of your fans in Pakistan think that because you have a Jewish heritage, you've got to get out of jail free pass.
No, I was in fact facing a very long jail sentence in 1968. The only reason I stayed out of jail was because of the Tet Offensive, which convinced the government to call off the trials. A Jewish heritage doesn't do a thing for you. In Guantanamo, there are no no Americans who are doing anything here or went to Guantanamo. And in fact, it's a very free country. There's a lot of things wrong with the United States, but it's a very free country, the most free in the world. There's more protection here for freedom of speech than any country I know of, much more than Europe, for example, and certainly the rest of the world. There are a lot of things wrong, but you can speak freely. I mean, take the institution where we're now sitting, MIT. In the 1960s, this institution was almost 100% supported by the Pentagon. The political science department was openly funded by the CIA and so on. Nevertheless, it was one of the main academic centers of anti-war resistance, and nothing was ever done to stop it.
Dr. Chomsky, in 2 sentences, somebody asked us, if you needed to ask for political asylum, which country would you prefer and why?
I've thought about it occasionally. First of all, I don't think it couldn't happen, but if it did, there are countries that I like say Ireland, for example. Tuscany, beautiful place. Even Berlusconi can't wreck it.
This person said they would move there.
Yeah.
Dr. Chomsky, your time is valuable. Thank you.
Thanks.
Pleasure.